Okay, so we're going to start this first lesson on the atom. Now, down the bottom, you can see I've got syllabus outcome. It's just a revision of stage 5 chemical world syllabus stuff. So hopefully, this is stuff that you should know, but if not, this is why we're doing it today. So let's begin. Now, imagine you had a block of iron, just like this nice tiled block of iron. Now, imagine you cut it into quarters, and then cut it each piece into quarters again. And then imagine you just kept cutting it in half, cutting it into quarters, down and down and down, to a point where you couldn't divide it any further. Okay, so it's small enough that you just can't cut it in half. This is a philosophical idea from long ago, found in many ancient cultures, and it's the invisible particles are called atoms, derived from the Greek atomos, which is basically means uncuttable. So it's this point where you can't cut it any further. Now, today, we know of 118 different types of atoms. We call those the elements, and these are arranged on the periodic table of the elements. So that's this one here. Now, this periodic table of the elements, this particular one that I've got up on the screen at the moment, that's the one that you're actually going to get in every chemistry exam through year 11 and 12. Okay, so it has all the information that you need to answer any of the questions. You can see some information's missing, um, but that's stuff that you don't need. Okay. Now we can see at the top here, we've got a little key. It shows us 4 main pieces of information. Um, the thing at the top, that's our atomic number. Each element has a different atomic number. We have the symbol. Okay, so it's just a shortened symbol form that we can use in reaction equations, that sort of stuff. The next thing is the standard atomic weight. We'll get to what the meaning of that is a bit further on, but you just need to know that that's what it is for now. And lastly, it's just the name of it. Okay, so they're the 4 bits of information. Like I said before, you can see that some things like the standard atomic weight isn't there for every single atom, but the other 3 bits of information are. So yeah, what I'll get you to do now, pause your video and use your periodic table to fill in the missing pieces of information. There should be one there in your book that you can actually have a look at. It is on page 3. Okay, so you can just have a look at that and fill in that information. All right, so now that you're back, what we'll do, we'll go through it. So looking at the first one, we find atomic number 6. Now, if you notice, they're all in order, so 6 is pretty easy to find. That gives us C as the symbol for carbon. Number 45, almost smack bang in the middle of the periodic table, RH, rhodium. We actually get the mass as 102.9. And lastly, potassium. Yeah, so number 19, K, is potassium. Now, types of elements. The elements within the periodic table are grouped by chemical properties. Okay, so generally, atoms that are around the same sort of area have similar properties. So let's have a look at the different groups or the different types within the periodic table. Firstly, on the very left-hand side, starting at lithium, going down to francium, we have the alkali metals. Okay, they're generally quite reactive with water, um, and yeah. The thing to note is that hydrogen isn't part of that group. Hydrogen's its own thing. It's very specific with its chemistry. It doesn't actually like to be with anything else. Now, the next group is the alkali earth metals. They're slightly less reactive, but they're still quite reactive themselves. We next have the transition metals. Okay, so that includes everything in that blue section. We leave out these 2 little boxes down here because they represent these two. Okay, so that's where those two things should actually appear um, in the periodic table. So normally it'd be, if we put it in properly, it'd be like this really stretched out thing, but we kind of condense it for convenience. Now, the next one is the post-transition metals. So they're still metals, but they're past that transition phase. Next, we have the metalloids. These are things we also call them semi-metals. So they kind of sit in between the metals and the non-metals, and their properties are a little bit different. They could be a bit more towards the metallic side or a bit more towards the non-metal side, depending on a bunch of different things. Next, we have the non-metals. Okay, so just that little block of 6 up there. They're chemically, they're a lot different to the metals, and they also uh, have very different properties. We have next the halogens. So in that second last group, fluorine down to tennessine. These groups are also quite reactive. Okay, so as we get into the extremes on both ends, they do become quite reactive. Lastly, and going against everything that I just said, we have the noble gases. So the ones on the very end, they're very non-reactive. We call them noble gases or inert gases just because they don't react with anything. As we said before, we have these ones down the bottom, the lanthanides and the actinides. Okay. Now, which types did the following elements belong to? So I'll let you pause this for a sec, go back to the groups that we just colored in, and have a look at which group they belong to. Okay, now that we're back, gold, if we have a look, it's right in the middle of the periodic table, so that belongs to the transition metals. Sorry, this isn't lining up for some reason. I'll figure it out later. Next, we have carbon. Okay, so that's a non-metal. Potassium is an alkali metal, so it's on the very left-hand side. Bismuth, it's kind of down the bottom to the right-hand side. You can see that it's post-transition metal. Gallium is just a bit up from bismuth. That's a metalloid. And lastly, we have chlorine, which is a halogen. Now, just a little summary of today's stuff. So, smallest indivisible particles are called atoms. There are 118 different types of atoms called the elements, and they're arranged on the periodic table. The elements are grouped by chemical properties into different types. Okay, so you don't need to memorize all the different types, but at least try to memorize the different trends at the moment. And that's all for today.